Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Anti-Doping Podcast, brought to you by the Partnership for Clean Competition. I'm your host, Dr. Marie McNeely, and today we are joined by our guest, Kacie Wallace. Listeners, Kacie is an attorney and the Team USA Athlete Ombuds. And Kacie's joining us to talk about the Office of the Athlete Ombuds, her career path, her role in clean sport, and her excellent work advocating for athletes. So, Kacie, welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm well, Marie. Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. You know, the work that the PCC does and the friends that we've made through that organization have done a lot for how we're able to support athletes. So I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for the shout out. And we are so excited to have you with us today, Kacie. And for some of our listeners out there who aren't familiar with the Office of Athlete Ombuds, perhaps first we'll start by just, can you describe the role of the Team USA Athlete Ombuds?
Yeah, we exist by federal statute in order to offer a cost-free, confidential, safe place for athletes to come to seek advice and get help resolving disputes. I think the way we view this work is that it's really an opportunity to empower Team USA athletes to be able to navigate this wildly complex ecosystem of rules and processes on and off the field of play, and to help them advocate for an environment that's safe, fair, transparent, inclusive, healthy. We work across all 50, give or take 53 Olympic and Paralympic sports on any sport-related issue. We mostly prioritize Team USA athletes, and those are the athletes generally who are competing at an international level on behalf of the U.S. in disciplines on an upcoming Olympic or Paralympic program. And again, our approach is really to provide a safe place for these athletes to come. We meet them where they are and stand alongside to guide them where they want to go, in part through confidential, independent advice, access to information, tools, resources, and support. We help them resolve or raise issues and concerns. And then I think just lastly, another key role that we play in supporting athletes is that our office, like many other ombuds across the world, is uniquely situated within the organization and within the movement to be able to advocate for these environment that's safe, fair, transparent, inclusive, and healthy. And through our work with athletes, access to various meetings, policies, relationships, and the knowledge we have of the ecosystem, we can use that knowledge to identify gaps or vulnerabilities or patterns of behavior. And whether that means we use that information to educate the community or we advocate for practical changes that will better support athletes in their efforts, both, again, on and off the field of play.
Oh, wonderful. And I know, Kacie, it's so important to have this open door and a place for athletes to go to talk through some of their concerns in sport. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how you found your way to this position. So can you tell us about your background and how you ended up working as the Team USA Athlete Ombuds?
It's a bit of a circuitous route. My career started on a more creative side. I designed educational toys and exhibits for Children's Museum and taught art therapy in a psychiatric institute. From there, much to my parents' dismay, I moved into the streets as a police officer, first with a uniform patrol, then Bison Narcotics, and then I was on a violence intervention team. After about 5 years of doing that, I came off the streets and back in an office. I ran the disciplinary system at Duke University for about a decade before going back to law school, becoming certified as a mediator and a master's of law in dispute resolution, as I began to see how systems and relationships intersected and were significantly impacted by communication and different approaches to conflict management. I've done some work with Rotary International in the area of international peace and conflict resolution. At that point, I found my friend and mentor, John Ruger, who was the first athlete ombuds for Team USA. I asked him if I could be his intern and test out some theories that I had about the importance of communication and relationships and conflict management in sport. He let me mediate a number of cases after the Athens Games, which paved the way for my involvement with the Olympic and Paralympic movement. So when he left that role 10 years later, I started this journey full time as the Athlete Ombuds. And I guess I've been here a little over 8.5 years now.
Very cool. And as I understand it, sport has kind of been a thread throughout your life as well. You're an athlete yourself, Kacie. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was a swimmer growing up. I played a number of sports in high school, but swimming was sort of always the thread for me through college, and then beyond started doing a lot of open water swims and that sort of thing. So water has been the passion.
Well, I think you've had a really cool career path and you found a neat position there in the Office of Athlete Ombuds. So let's talk about organization. How is the office organized and who are the key team members there?
So we have an amazing team. There's 4 of us plus an assistant and a whole army of friends and partners. On our team, Emily Azevedo, Bryce Borman, and Aaron Moharis. One is an Olympian, one is a Paralympian. 3 of us are attorneys. And collectively, I say we have about 40 years of experience in the movement. As I mentioned, we work across all 50 plus Olympic and Paralympic sports on any sport related matter. So the way we organize ourselves is a bit of improv, but also we do our best to find information and find people to whom we can reach out to in order to resolve an issue for an athlete. We have some lanes in our office as far as areas of expertise and who takes on which cases, but really it depends a lot on knowledge base, relationships, who has relationships with experts, with the sport, with the athletes. And then we also try to maintain some level of balance. Athletes are all over the world and issues come in day and night, every day, all through the year. So we do a lot of supporting one another. I would say all of us are generalists with some bit of focus on different areas of expertise.
Oh, that makes sense. And I know you help athletes with a wide variety of cases. So there's no usual sort of everyday situation, but what are some of the more common issues that arise related to athlete rights and responsibilities that you're helping athletes navigate?
It depends on the year. As we ramp up for Pan Am Games coming in a month or two, Pan Am Games, and then with Paris coming next year, our case numbers go up. I would say on the lead up to a games, we can have as many as about 100 cases a month.
Oh, wow.
About a third of those are team selection related and athletes' opportunity to make a team. Again, more so during a qualification period leading up to a games. And then the next biggest chunk of our work is around anti-doping. Probably 20 to 25% of our cases in any given month or year are related to anti-doping. So last year, I think we had about 150 anti-doping cases. And it's a wide range of issues where athletes might need help with a TUE process, responding to an allegation about a missed test. They are trying to track down the source of a positive analytical test. It might be related to a non-analytical matter. They might need help finding legal counsel, getting mental health support. And I think, again, our approach is we try to take a really holistic approach and understand the impact of either a pending process or a finding on their ability to train, compete, continue or not continue to receive stipends, health insurance, prize money, their relationship with sponsors, when things are going to be published, et cetera. We really try to look at the whole journey holistically. Less frequently, but certainly as important, we also get calls from clean athletes who want to report something or they stand to get a medal upgraded based on a reallocation due to a doping positive after the fact. So it's a super wide range beyond team selection and anti-doping, a lot of issues around safe environment, safe sport, health and wellness, eligibility, commercial aspects of competition, codes of conduct, that sort of thing.
Definitely. And I know you're interacting with these athletes probably frequently during very stressful times in their lives or careers. So knowing what to expect is important. So what can athletes expect in terms of just the process that they would go through and perhaps the timeline when they reach out to the Office of Athlete Ombuds with an issue or a question?
Yeah, again, it depends on the type of case. So I'll stick with the anti-doping cases for the purposes of our conversation. I think first and foremost, we want to make sure that athletes expect and are delivered a safe place to come think through how to navigate this challenging situations. Most of our cases in the anti-doping world start with a statement that's included on the bottom of every positive test letter that goes out from USADA that says, if you need confidential independent advice, call the Athlete Ombuds. We also have a relationship with USADA such that when the investigators are questioning athletes, the first thing that they say to them is, if you want to contact the Athlete Ombuds before this interview, you're welcome to. So we might get calls in a crisis moment or when they get the letter or even a week or two after the fact as a deadline is approaching. We don't have these same opportunities at the international federation level. So most of our work on that level, we do count on word of mouth. But when it comes at a crisis moment and they weren't expecting it, they have a competition around the corner, the first thing is we just try to understand where they are, what's going on, what's the context of this situation for them, both personally and from a sport perspective. There's always lots of uncertainty and stress. We'll connect with them immediately and then stay connected throughout the case. We'll try to help them map out next steps. We'll try to help them figure out how to communicate or if to communicate this issue with friends, family, teammates, coaches. What does it mean for their relationship with their sponsors? How do they go about identifying the source if they don't know the source of the positive test? If they want to admit responsibility, how might they do this? They have questions about how long it'll take, when anything's made public. And we do a lot of discussions around, do they need a lawyer? When do they need a lawyer? Do they need mental health along the way? So again, just sort of sticking with them alongside this process and figuring out what the tools and resources are at any given moment.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to emphasize this holistic approach you've mentioned a couple times, where it's not just legal advice. It's not just the process. You're looking at the whole person and trying to just help them get through this difficult time.
Yeah, it really is. And it's been a long journey for us, I think, recognizing how important that holistic approach is, not only for how they compete on the field of play, but how they are walking through training and just everyday life with the weight of the situation on their mind.
Absolutely. And I imagine your legal background comes in handy here, both in law enforcement and as an attorney. So can you talk about how this background of yours informs or maybe influences your work in your current role?
So we used to have these Pathfinder projects in law school where we were given a topic and then had to go off and gather the most useful, relevant, and reliable resources. And I think what's really fun about the role of an ombuds is that every day there's some new topic and a Pathfinder project to figure out. In doping, it can be contamination, accidental ingestion, lotions, potions, water, meat, makeup, medication, understanding whether the B sample gets automatically tested, if it costs anything, depending on who's processing the case, understanding what an entry date is for an upcoming competition or the definition of, quote, an athlete in good standing, how COVID impacts your oxygen levels, et cetera. So some of this is legal research. A lot of this is internet stalking and asking Siri. ChatGPT introduces a whole new interesting world of just trying to figure out how to help an athlete. But it's really understanding the rules and the framework and how to help an athlete for themselves understand those rules and the framework and how they can work within it. We often coach athletes on writing letters around whereabouts or missed tests or what have you, using tools that we used in law school, the IRAC method, and how to match circumstances with rules and drawing conclusions. And I think it's also the background in alternative dispute resolution really helps have that understanding and appreciation of how to move someone from past to present to future. And that is a process and a long process. Understanding their perspective and starting from there, how to de-escalate some really stressful moments, identifying what the issues are, understanding how to find the research, how to find the rules, how to go about problem solving, and really an openness to explanations and theories that may or may not have been proven yet. I think lastly, where a legal background has really come in useful is the ability to be frank and candid while still being compassionate. Whether they made a mistake or did something intentionally, how to support them without judgment so that they can accept responsibility and or figure out how to move forward.
Absolutely. I think you can just hear in the way that you respond to questions too, just this logical, calm, empathetic approach that you bring to these difficult situations. And I'm sure that helps a lot. It goes a long way, I think, just having a listening ear sometimes for these athletes.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's talk about the resources and services next. Kacie, what kinds of services and resources can you provide athletes at the office?
I'll start again where I've started a couple times, that I think the best service and resource we offer is a confidential, safe, independent place where they can be messy, ask whatever's on their mind, and we'll help them without judgment, shame, or blame. From there, I think we view our resources, some of them internally as far as guidance and coaching, and figuring out rules. And then we also do quite a bit on identifying external resources or referrals, whether that is experts in the field, whether that is legal counsel. We have a legal aid fund where we have some help from attorneys who have a lot of familiarity, expertise, and experience in this field. And they either provide pro bono service or we can help an athlete with financial assistance to hire one of those attorneys or any attorney that they wish, as well as experts. And then I think a critical resource at any given point is the mental health resources. And we have a really well-established mental health team for Team USA. So we have a lot of access to mental health resources for athletes in this process.
Well, I think that's phenomenal. And I think something people may not realize is that these services and resources that the office is providing are free. So how is the USOPC able to provide these really valuable services and resources to athletes free of charge?
Many of them are free. Some of them, like the mental health resources, many of those are covered through insurance. Our legal aid can cover up to a certain amount. But I'll go back to the role of the ombuds was established by Congress in the amendments to the Ted Stevens Act back in 1998. And that was really at the urging of the Athletes Advisory Council, where they said athletes need a cost-free, confidential place to go for independent advice, particularly around their opportunity to compete in international competition. And since then, there's been some significant events that have contributed to the recognition of the importance of these resources in our program, as well as the limitations of our program. Some very significant abuse situations, significant mental health crises. And with those, there was more emphasis placed on our role and our ability to support athletes through these difficult situations. Again, resulting from some of these situations, the USOPC changed their mission. They changed the focus to empowering athletes on and off the field of play, both with competitive excellence and well-being. And I think much of our work is centered around the well-being of athletes as they are on their journeys to competitive excellence. And with those changes, not only a larger investment in our office through the legal aid program, but also the mental health team, a full-time staff with the Team USA Athlete Commission, an ethics and compliance program, an athlete services division. The list goes on, just really trying to build out the safety nets for athletes. And I'll just mention one more thing about our legal aid program. Because our office is positioned to serve all Team USA athletes, which means we have to go about it impartially, we created this legal aid program so that athletes can access justice and their own individual representatives when they need an individual advocate. You know, the importance of this is very evident when you have a team selection case and two athletes are advocating for the same spot, or you have an abuse allegation and an athlete on either side of the situation comes forward and needs help. And we've been very fortunate with this program and this small team of attorneys with a lot of experience and expertise and their willingness to provide pro bono service. So we have expanded our capacity to help athletes. And it's not all free. There's caps on the support that we can give, but I think through that support, it's really benefited athletes in anti-doping and many other situations.
Absolutely. I think this support is so key. And we mentioned independence. This is something where anyone can come to the office. And like you said, no judgment, no blame. And I think the independence is an important part of it. So what does that independence look like? And why do you feel like it's so important for your office to maintain?
So over the past few years, we've been really intentional about aligning with the standards of the International Ombuds Association and fitting within the paradigms and the standards that other ombuds offices across the world fit within. We don't squarely fit within the model of an organizational ombuds, but we do follow the principles of an organizational ombuds. And those are confidentiality, independence, impartiality, and informality. And with most organizational type ombuds, it's not fair to say that we're completely independent. The Ted Stevens Act, which establishes our existence, says that the USOPC is required to hire and provide salary, benefits, and administrative expenses for an ombuds and its support staff for athletes. So we are paid by the USOPC. I report to a committee of the board of the USOPC. And then further, the Act says that it mandates that we provide independent advice to athletes at no cost on sport-related matters. So we've further developed through the International Ombuds Association exactly what this independence can look like and how we explain it to athletes. We're free from interference or direction in carrying out our duties. We're autonomous in our determination of when and how we perform our duties and offer our services. And there is part of our principles that say we should not be subject to retaliation from the organization or from NGBs based on the use of our discretion. And then finally, we set out very clearly that we're not agents of the USOPC, either in our ability to receive notice of claims or grievances or in our ability to speak on behalf of the USOPC. So it's a dotted line. We are not completely independent. We do try to make sure in every situation with an athlete that we are giving independent advice. And then there's some backstops and some safety nets to reassure our independence. And it takes a lot of maneuvering every day because we're trying to build trust throughout the movement. And at the same time, we're supporting athletes with claims against the USOPC, their NGB, USADA, WADA, the IOC, their international federation. So all these things are independence, impartiality, confidentiality, and formality. They're all kind of inextricably linked together to create this role of an ombuds to support athletes.
Absolutely. And I think it is important to emphasize that what an athlete says in this ombuds meetings won't then be reported back to the USOPC. That level of independence, I think, is critical, and that level of privacy and confidentiality as well. So how do you ensure that an athlete maintains that privacy and confidentiality in your conversations?
Confidentiality is really the cornerstone of our practice. Part of this is derived, again, from the Ted Stevens Act. We're very fortunate that we have this federal statute that helps protect athletes' confidentiality. And the Act mandates that we maintain as confidential any information communicated or provided to us in confidence. There are some exceptions related to safe sport or felonies or where someone is at risk of harm to themselves or others. And of course, with permission, because we do a lot of mediating and facilitating. So we're very careful with athletes. What can we share? What should we not share? The most recent amendments of the Act really strengthened these confidentiality provisions and the protection that we can offer to athletes who place their trust in us. And the Act says that we can't be compelled to testify or produce evidence in proceedings, that our communications and our work product are not subject to discovery or any other means of legal compulsion. They're not admissible as evidence. Every governing body, every national governing body is required by Congress to post our confidentiality policy on their website. We were required to submit our confidentiality policy to the Federal Register. So there's some pretty good protections that we have. I would say most ombuds offices across the world don't have the level of protection that the Ted Stevens Act has given to us. And I think one other really important piece of this in creating a safe place for athletes to come, not only the confidentiality, but there's an anti-retaliation clause in the Act that says no employee, contractor, volunteer, the USOPC, or its members can take or threaten to take any action against an athlete for seeking assistance from us. So it's all out there for us. And every day we talk about the importance of the confidentiality and protecting what athletes share with us.
Absolutely. And I think in addition to managing these cases and helping athletes through some of these difficult situations that they end up in, you're also an athlete advocate, we mentioned. So what are some of the ways that you are advocating for athletes when it comes to sports law and policy?
We sit in a lot of meetings and just some examples that come to mind. The USOPC is given a chance to weigh in on WADA code revisions, and we are always included in commenting for WADA code revisions, as well as the USOPC National Anti-Doping Policy, USOPC bylaws, and the Ted Stevens Act. USADA recently, with the revised code, had the chance to redo their protocol, and they offer the opportunity for us to comment and participate in some of those revisions. Along with the USOPC and USADA and the Team USA Athletes Council, we participated in diversifying and reconfiguring the pool of arbitrators that serve to hear anti-doping cases. We've written letters to the IFs about issues that have become challenges for athletes. I worked very closely with the WADA Athlete Commission and WADA to create a global anti-doping ombuds. And then the last thing I'll mention is we have a partnership with Law and Sport so that Team USA athletes can have free access to their wealth of articles and expert analysis on legal issues. So a lot of what we're trying to do is advocate for athletes. And at the same time, we're trying to empower them with information so they can advocate for themselves.
Phenomenal. I think these partnerships and collaborations are key for sport advocacy and also key for advancing anti-doping. And I know you recently served as a panelist, Kacie, at the PCC's conference in New York City back in April to speak about your role as athlete ombuds. So what were you able to learn at the conference that perhaps has been useful for you in your role? And maybe how does this USOPC USADA partnership with the Partnership for Clean Competition and the research that's being funded inform some of the work that you're doing?
It's been a huge help. And it was really nice to be able to go back to New York and see some of the folks involved with PCC. You know, I see their work from a distance a lot. And then it was really helpful to see it up close and actually meet some of the people doing the research. I think the first and foremost thing that was a lot of fun at the PCC conference was having Evan Bates and Madison Chalk there, two figure skaters who participated in the team event and are still waiting for medals based on the Valieva case. So as that case plays out, Evan and Madison talked a lot about why anti-doping matters for athletes. And I think it was really good grounding for the whole group to remember what's at the core of this. And then as the 2 days went on, meeting the scientists and listening to their presentations was really useful for me. When an athlete gets a letter, test positive for a banned substance, and they have no idea the source, just listening to some of the research that's being done around the risks of the supplement industry as well as the functional food industry, and me learning more about the red flags that we can help athletes look for around herbal origin, or what are some of the ingredients in food that appear to be innocuous, like primrose oil or berry extract, but could lead to a positive test. Another situation when an athlete gets a letter from USADA that their lab data from their biological passport demonstrates changes in their blood markers that suggest blood doping, they're calling our office saying, I have no idea what this means. How do I even begin to look at these labs and understand this? So those presentations for me and the underlying research and advancements really help me figure out how to explain it to athletes. The other marker type case that I remember well, the presentations from PCC, if an athlete gets a letter suggesting that their TE ratio was more than 4, and therefore there's some indication of exogenous use of a steroid, and it's been confirmed by the GCCIRMF. Again, the athlete calls and says, what in the world does this mean? So again, it was a chance to listen to some of the research and meet some of the people doing that research, and the ability to call them afterwards and say, can you help me understand something? Because I'm trying to help an athlete understand. So I wish we'd do the conference every year. It's a wealth of knowledge and really good people doing a lot of good work.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to hear that you enjoyed the conference and that it was beneficial. And I think you're absolutely right. Those connections with experts who may be able to walk you through some of these things that athletes are struggling with is key. And I know just in general, anti-doping is a very fast moving, rapidly evolving field. So in your experience over the course of your career in anti-doping, how has the field changed since you started working in this space?
I don't know whether the field's changed as much as my awareness and perspective has changed. I think I came into it like many others view doping or anti-doping, sort of bifurcating athletes into clean athletes versus cheaters or dopers. And I think what I've learned is that there's a whole bunch of athletes in the middle between those two ends. For them, it's purgatory. The burden's on them to prove something that can be next to impossible to improve. What kind of tea did you drink 6 months ago? Where did the meat in the meatloaf that you ate 3 months ago at a highway diner come from? How does your dog's medication get into your system? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I think for me, it's been a recognition that there's this whole group of athletes who are trying to do their best for clean sport. And there's a lot of speed bumps along the way to help them navigate. But I think as far as the field, there have been 2 revisions to the code since I started this work. We've had a lot of issues around state-sponsored doping schemes, and learning about those and the resulting massive skepticism and loss of trust in the system has been really challenging. I think the science has gotten better in the detection. And in some cases, the detection is so great that now it presents a challenge when you realize how much contamination there is out there or lack of regulation. The creation and delegation of testing and sanctions to either ITA or the CAS anti-doping division, that's been a big change. And in our little athlete ombuds world, just establishment of that legal aid fund and broadening our relationships with the labs and with the scientists that's helping athletes to overcome these strict liability scenarios. We're getting better. It's changing. We need to keep getting better. And also protecting clean athletes, because I think when clean athletes drink a tea that's got something in it, helping make sure they're not also part of this tendency to label athletes as dopers. So I think all this has been supporting clean sport as well as helping those who are caught in the system where we're trying to promote integrity across the board.
Certainly. Well, Kacie, you brought up some really great points. And I love that you brought up the idea that it's really not as black and white anti-doping as people think it is. There's a lot of complexity, and there's actually still a lot of unanswered questions and big challenges that the field as a whole is working to solve. And oftentimes there are barriers, whether it's feasibility, time, funding, whatever the case may be. If we took those barriers out of the way, this is your day, Kacie. If you had all of the resources you could dream of, what is the one problem in anti-doping that you would want to solve most?
Yeah, so listening to me for the last half hour, this probably won't surprise you. There's an African proverb that says when spider webs unite, they can hold back even a lion. And I think it emphasizes the strength of unity and collaboration and the ability to achieve remarkable results when we all work together effectively. For me, there's a lot of things that could be improved, but really what seems to be the biggest issue is better coordination among the key players in the movement. We continue to hear that athletes want to believe in the integrity on the field of play, no matter when and where they're competing. And that demands coordination of testing across the world, coordination around results management and databases and lots of different things. There's a lot of divisiveness between governments and sports organizations and international federations, NATOs, WADA, IOC, IPC, CAS, fan sponsors, and athletes. And it often creates an us versus them framework. And it's ever changing for good or for bad. But I think if I had one huge project that I could work on, it would be tying together these pieces and these parts in a collective effort between all these entities to create that spider web to maintain the integrity of sports and preserve the spirit around fair play.
I absolutely love this. Do you have a place that you would start, or maybe some low-hanging fruit that you would say, these are the things that I would put those resources towards first?
Well, independence within the system is always a big one. A whistleblower protection program, I think, is important. We have a little piece of that. Improved testing methods. I think PCC is doing a lot around that. Ethical sponsorship. None of these are really low-hanging, so
right.
I'm not sure this, but improved education and awareness. I think those are all pieces of this larger puzzle around coordination.
Absolutely. I think those are key places to start building this system that can really support clean sport in a collaborative way going forward. So we appreciate you sharing your insights and just telling us more about yourself and the wonderful work that you do. But if our listeners want to learn more about you and the Office of Athlete Ombuds, what is the best way for them to do so?
Always welcome to call. All of our contact information is on our website, which is usathlete.org. And certainly I hope if there's athletes listening that they will feel free to call us anytime if we can be helpful. And the friends of the PCC, particularly the scientists who think that they might have a role in helping what we're trying to do to support athletes, that they would call as well. So our website is probably the best place to start.
Fantastic. Well, listeners, definitely check out that website. Get in touch if you have any questions or if you have ideas or thoughts that you can contribute to the Olympic movement and the wonderful work that's being done there at the Office of Athlete Ombuds. And Kacie, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks for what you're doing and the PCC and everybody who's listening. I mean, I think this is the steps that we need to take to have spiderwebs unite.
Oh, I love it. Well, Kacie, wonderful note to end on. Thank you again. And listeners, thank you for joining us for this conversation today. It would be wonderful if you haven't had a chance to yet to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform to share your experience with the show. And listeners, please note that the Anti-Doping Podcast features a wide variety of clean sport experts, and episodes may include statements and or viewpoints that do not necessarily reflect the views or values of the PCC. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Anti-Doping Podcast.